Windham County Legislative Candidates Forum at 6 p.m. at the Marlboro Graduate Center, room 2E upstairs. This forum is sponsored by the Vermont Workers Center in cooperation with Vermont Council on Independent Living and 350.org.
So we can get moving.
Now you're in my way.
I would like to introduce myself. I'm Spoon Agave. I'm a member of the Vermont Workers Center, and I'm moderating this evening. I'm going to be making a few remarks that'll take about 4 or 5 minutes, and then we will get into testimonies and questions. People will have, I'd like to ask the candidates, I will mention this again, it's going to be very quick. You're not going to have much time, about 1.5 minutes. We're going to have a timekeeper and we'll signal you. So, let us begin. I'd like to say hello and welcome to everybody here. Thank you, everyone, for coming to the Windham County Forum on Human Rights and the Economy. This forum and similar forums around the state are being organized by the Vermont Workers Center in partnership with the Vermont Center for Independent Living, 350 Vermont, the Green Mountain Self-Advocates, the Vermont AFL-CIO, the Vermont State Employees Association, and the American Federation of Teachers in Vermont. Our thanks also go out to everyone who helped make this forum happen, especially our volunteers who helped get the word out and are helping here tonight, and our partners at VCIL. We are grateful to Green Mountain Orchards, the Brattleboro Food Co-op, Price Chopper, Vermont Country Deli, and Amy's Bakery Arts for donating refreshments. A special thank you to the candidates who have joined us here tonight. Unfortunately, a number of candidates were unable to come due to conflicts. One candidate, Emily Long, sent a statement which is available on the side table. I'd like now to go right into the candidate introductions. I may need a little help here. On my right, the first candidate is Jeanette White. She's a senator from Windham County. On her right is Tristan Tolino, our House representative from District 3 in Brattleboro. To his right is Aaron Diamondstone, a candidate for the Senate. To his right is Becca Ballant, a candidate for the Senate. And next to her right is John Moran, representing Windham Bennington. And next to him on his right is Jerry Levy, who is the Liberty Union candidate for the Senate. And on his right is Deborah Wright, independent candidate for the House, Windham 3. And to her right is Mary Hassan, independent candidate for the Senate. And to her right is Molly Burke, our House representative from Brattleboro District 2. And to her right is Mike Maricki from
Putney.
From Putney, I'm sorry. I didn't get...
The People's Republic of Putney.
Oh. All right. I have a few opening remarks. The organizations hosting this forum are united in a vision for the future of Vermont. The foundation of that vision rests upon the essential belief that as human beings, we are entitled to lead our lives with justice, dignity, and well-being. To that end, we know that all Vermont residents must have the ability to fulfill our human right to such things as food and housing, access to needed services, including comprehensive and quality health care, sufficient and dignified employment, and a clean and safe environment for ourselves, our children, and all the generations to follow. These are fundamental conditions required by every person to lead a decent, productive, and satisfying life. Many of us have worked on specific issues for many years, but we have come to realize that these are a part of a larger human rights crisis that calls for bolder and bigger solutions. This January, our legislature will take their seats at a particularly auspicious and critical crossroad, and legislators will have important choices to make, including major decisions about health care. Down one path, access to health care will continue to be difficult for those with limited means. Workers will lack important workplace rights. Budget cuts will undermine essential public services, and the impacts of climate change will grow. While we hear a lot of talk about these problems, we don't seem to be any closer to the solutions. Instead, we see people's needs pitted against another, and Band-Aids applied to stop the crisis from getting out of control. We cannot continue to go down this path. We must choose a new direction that recognizes our shared humanity and our human rights. This path will take courage, but it can take us out of a deepening crisis while advancing human dignity and equity in Vermont. By choosing this path, we commit to meeting all health needs in our communities and financing our health care system through equitable taxes. We commit to transitioning to a sustainable economy with good jobs that help provide what our communities really need while enhancing and embracing rights and dignity in the workplace. We commit to a budgeting process that succeeds in meeting people's needs as well as raising revenue equitably. We commit to grounding economic development in policies that preserve and sustain our environment. At each of these forums being held across the state, we are asking candidates 4 questions which address health care, the budget, work with dignity, and climate justice. After each of these questions, there will be a question from the audience. If you have a question, write it on a card. We ask, again, we ask the candidates to limit their answer. It's unfortunately that we have so little time, but to try to limit your answers to just a minute and a half. Now, I would like to introduce my co-worker and co-moderator, Ellen Schwartz.
Okay, I'm going to try out a different sound system. Is this working?
Is it working now?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're going to use this one. I'm going to invite up Leah Koch from Brattleboro. Leah is a member of the Vermont Workers Center, the Healthcare is a Human Right campaign, and she's going to give a brief testimony to the candidates and then follow that with a question. So come on up, Leah.
Hi, my name is Leah Koch, and I live in Brattleboro. I have a daughter who has autism, who has been to the retreat 4 times in the past 2 years. After her first day, they put a team together to help me when my daughter had a crisis. But when the second crisis came, the plan wasn't so useful. And because of the severity of her condition, she ended up back in the retreat. This past May, she was back in the retreat for another crisis. At this point, they put her on a med that had a bad side effect, so she was taken off of it. She ended up back in the retreat for her 4th time about a month ago. They tried a med, but then again there were bad side effects, so she was taken off. She came off the med on a Friday. The following Monday I went to a meeting with her team, and they said she was going to be discharged because of her insurance was running out. The treatment team thought she was fine to go home. They were putting a plan in place, but it was still in the beginning stages. She seemed fine in the moment, but I was worried about what may happen because I knew from experience that she would seem fine, and several months later she ended up back in the hospital. They said she's a complex case, and I agree. She has autism, she's going through puberty, and she has anxiety, and also she's a beautiful, sweet kid who loves to dress up and go on her scooter and use the computer and play with neighborhood children. As her mom, I want for her not to have to go through crisis to crisis. When she has a crisis, people jump. She ends up in the retreat, and her last 2 hospitalization stays, they tried a medication. But the side effects were a problem, and they weren't really any alternatives then that her insurance will cover. Because of the side effects from the medication, we're trying natural remedies and Reiki, but all of this is out-of-pocket cost, and if we can't afford it, she doesn't get it. My daughter will be autistic for her whole life. She needs long-term services and support. I'm looking forward to the day when Green Mountain Care will provide the care my daughter needs, not just when she's in crisis, but the ongoing care she needs to live a happy and productive life. I know that I am not the only person in this situation, that other people have other needs that are just as important as my daughters and my family. My question is, do you commit to passing a public financing plan for the universal health care that meets our health needs and equally funded through progressive taxes rather than out-of-pocket costs? Will you help overcome any obstacles on the path to our human rights to health care? Thank you.
Was that question heard clearly by all the candidates? Okay, thank you. Before, just to get started, Aaron, pick a number from 1 to 10. 7. You're first, Deborah. And then we'll continue on down, and we'll come back here.
I want to thank you very much for that, for your personal story. One of my 11 grandchildren is also autistic, and he has not only difficulties medically, but as well with school because of the type of autism that he has. So I'm with you. Your services should be available to you, near you, when you need them on a regular basis. We should not have to Band-Aid everything. You should not have to go from crisis to crisis. That is not the way you should live. And I will do everything I can as a House member, if I am elected, for Windham 3, to make sure that we have non-Band-Aided services, that we provide the taxation and payments available so that every medical situation is covered when it needs to be covered and not in an emergency. I'm Mary Hassan, and I'm running for Windham County Senate. And like yourself, I know exactly what you're going through, precisely. I sat in on a conference that meets once a month in Guilford for autistic families like yourself. It's a small group, but it's growing and it is a challenge. And I know from having had a child, well actually 2 children, who have challenges, that healthcare is the biggest priority that I counted on. Having been here almost 17 years, I am thrilled with the care that we have. I know that it meant everything in the world to me to be able to count on the physicians and the staffing, and there were numerous problems by myself as they were very active.
Almost time.
I appreciate that you asked that we help you, and if I'm elected, I will definitely help you.
I'm Molly Burke, and I represented District 2 in Brattleboro for the past 6 years, and I'm running again. And my answer to the question is yes, I totally support universal health care, affordable, progressive taxation. I, too, experienced when my children were young inadequate insurance. You worry when you're taking your child to the emergency room, can you afford it? And I think that we are so far behind other countries in terms of what we can offer. We also need to offer alternative medicine covered as part of our package. Thank you.
Well, I come from a big family, so I don't need a microphone, but perhaps they need it for the television. I'm Mike Merwicki. I represent Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster, the Windham 4 district. What I'd like to share is I support what you're talking about here, but what we're talking about is the first phase of the reform we need. We're talking about right now health insurance reform. And what I would like to move on to as the next step is health care reform. And part of that is I'm on the board of Sojourn's Community Health Clinic. They practice biological medicine, homeopathy, integrative medicine, and I think what we need to do is widen the opportunities for people to have access to care like that, so we don't have to just rely on allopathic medicine. And people deserve the options like you do, and I want to thank you for your courage in sharing the story. And I hope that you also can be in touch with people like me, because we might be able to help. I think that's the most important job we do as elected representatives, is to be advocates and make the phone calls and open the doors for you. So I don't know who your representative is, but I hope you're in touch with them, and if you're not, it's a good day to start that.
So, thank you, Leah. Yes, I will support a universal access, publicly funded, in a progressive manner system, but that includes, we call it above the neck and below the neck health care. Above the neck is mental health, vision, and oral. So it would eventually include everything, probably not at the start. But here's my plea to you. There are a lot of doubters in the 180 people up in the legislature. And so this is not going to happen unless we can make sure that Governor Shumlin is elected with a huge turnout. He needs to get a big turnout. Otherwise, legislators will use it as an excuse for not being bold and not following the single-payer system that we're working toward. We need to make sure that the legislators do not use an excuse that the population has abandoned this idea. So my plea to you is get out and vote, and make sure you get 10 of your friends to get out and vote for Shumlin. Thank you, and me.
Good evening, I'm Tristan Tolino. I do not have a loud voice. Not blessed with that. What's that?
No, it's hooked up over there.
Okay, so I can do better. I'll try to do better. I represent Brattleboro's 3rd district. I am running for re-election for the first time, having served for the last 2 years in the House. I absolutely support the principles behind the question. I think that you, in this room, in this county, you have a group of people that are among the best advocates for some of the agenda, some of the items that are of particular concern to the people here tonight. And I think Jeanette is absolutely right. Our biggest challenge, besides sort of sending the signal to the governor and to the rest of the state that we are still behind this, our biggest challenge is going to be working with our colleagues from parts of the state where this issue is not as strongly supported, with as many, really great advocates willing to step forward and tell their stories. So I pledge to do that. I'm going to do my absolute best. I do like numbers. I'm going to do my absolute best to be strong on the numbers, because part of where people can let doubt slip in is if they're uncomfortable with the numbers. So that's an area where I think I can be strong and be an advocate for this issue.
Hi, I'm Aaron Diamondstone. I'm running for state senate for the Liberty Union Party. I have 3 children that have special needs, one foster child, one stepson, and one my biological son. I don't have health insurance at this point. I lost it. And I believe the way to deal with the problem that you're having is to have no profits in health care. I think we need a socialized system that's fair and equitable to everybody and moves towards ideal communism. I think that everybody working at equal pay and for the common good is where we have to head, because capitalism is going to drive us all to extinction. Thank you.
So, can you hear me in the back? Becca Balla, I'm running for state senate here in Windham County. And yes, I absolutely support universal health care coverage, affordable, publicly financed with a progressive taxation system. I also want to say, I know so many people in this room, I'm sure, have had the experience that I've had of having gaps in my life when I had no health care coverage, and it's a terrifying experience. Especially, I have asthma, and my medication is very expensive. And so I understand what that feels like when you have to make really careful choices about how you're going to pay for your medication. And I want to say thank you so much for sharing your story. I also am a parent, and I know from being a teacher that one of the other things that we need to think about in this county in particular, and some other rural parts of Vermont, is that we have a problem with providers. So I know there are waiting lists for students who are waiting to get psychiatric evaluation, not even care, just evaluation. There's a shortage of primary care physicians. So as Mike Maricki said, the first part is talking about the financing system, the insurance system, but we really need to look at the way that healthcare is provided to us and all the different options that we have, and we need to work really carefully to expand the number of providers that we have here in Windham County, because, thank you, Spoon.
I'm State Representative John Moran. The towns in Windham County I represent are Dover, Wardsboro, and Somerset. I represent towns in another county too. The lack of universal health care is what got me into politics to start with. Yes, health care is a human right, and there is no question, for example, that everybody has a right to health care, and it has to be based on not necessarily services that are provided. It has to be based on the needs of the clients that get those services. We passed mandatory insurance coverage for autism from 0 to up to age 6. When I was there a few years ago, we passed further mandatory coverage. It's run into some glitches in terms of the affordability, but what we need to do is persist in this universal health care, because the system we currently have, it is not working. When we go into January, and whoever goes up there, we need to hit the ground running to create a system that is a single-payer universal health care system. I would add, to get the administration's position, I have set up a forum in Dover on Monday, October 20th at 6:30 p.m. We are going to have Lawrence Miller, Robin Lunge, and a member from the Green Mountain Health Care Board will come down and answer any questions constituents have about what the administration is going to bring to us in January in terms of a single-payer health care plan.
Monday? Yes.
Right.
Jerry Levy, Liberty Union candidate for State Senate. Your eloquent statement, thank you so much, represents the pathos of so many hundreds, perhaps thousands of people in this county, in this state. We should have cradle-to-grave health care with no limits. The only way we're going to do that, single payer, would be a nice start, a nice bridge. We have to put healthcare workers on salary. It can't be for profit. We have to get rid of the insurance companies and go directly to a way of financing healthcare from cradle to grave through progressive taxation that really addresses the inequities between the wealthy and the poor in this county and this state, and the difference between them, so that we can use our resources for everyone, not just for the few. I think we have to work towards that, and I think we have to face some hard decisions eventually ask some questions about where are our resources, who has them, and are we really willing to share? Are we really going to be the state that we say we are? And I would work in any way I could in the Senate towards that.
Thank you.
We have a question from the audience for the candidates. I have a disability and I am able to work but unable to find work. What will you do to give employers an incentive to hire people with disabilities?
Mary, would you like to start?
This is an area that I really feel is important.
We have upstairs in this very building, Voc Rehab, which helps to match the abilities of people with work situations. It's a phenomenal resource. It is probably overwhelmed. I know that I also have seen fantastic results from when they do match those individuals with jobs. But I can give you one example very quickly. As I was a paraeducator, and I had a student that had a phenomenal ability to concentrate regardless of what was going on in the room and do data entry. And I suggested quite candidly that he actually get a computer course, and they refused to give it to him. So we have to advocate at a very young age for individuals throughout the time that they are in school, that they are access to the working environment. And as far as additional programs that might be available to access, I would like to be able to provide an additional source, especially for our deaf community, which is now underserved. That would be through a payroll tax to an incentive for employers to hire on more people.
Time.
I think this is a very important issue. I would support incentives for employers. I would support and would like to hear more about what kind of legislation could be helpful to move this along. It's not something I know a lot about, but I do know that we need to provide for meaningful employment for all people. And so I would like to hear more from the community about what kind of things could be helpful. As again, I would support any kind of legislation or incentives that would make this a better climate for someone looking for a job.
I work currently on the House Human Services Committee, and one of the agencies we have oversight over is Human Services, which includes the Department of Aging and Independent Living, which provides services. What we've been seeing, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here, is that other states provide subsidies to employers with a combination of federal and state dollars. I think we have an opportunity to do similarly, create what they call open shops, where workers are not going to be judged based on how much production they do or have to keep up with everybody else, but that there can be accommodations made, just like in school, where we have people who learn differently or need accommodations. And like I said, we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. We can look and see what other states are doing, and I think we can open up opportunities for that. That said, I want to say that one of the things I think is the most important thing we can do as advocates is to stand up for the aging, for the disabled, for small children. These are the voiceless, really voiceless groups out there. And if there's anything we can do here, we have to stand up for those constituencies.
There are incentives that could be provided. I think that Mike is right. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. I don't know what those incentives are. I do know that working with Voc Rehab and expanding their ability to serve people is important. One of the things that I think would be really important to creating more jobs and allowing employers to hire more people is to remove health care from their responsibility. If they no longer are responsible for providing health care to their employees, they can be more flexible. They can hire people at 20 hours a week. They can hire them at different times of the day. So I think that that is a first step that we need to take. And I don't know what the incentives are, but I'll work with anybody who comes up with some.
So for many years, I ran the restaurant that preceded the Whetstone Station, and I had a number of employees that came through Voc Rehab and some of the other programs in the community. It's something that I feel very strongly about, and I do support better incentives, but the point of incentives, I think, is to change the apprehension, the culture of the business community around what people with disabilities can do in the workplace. And it's just that, you know, it's to make it easier for people to do the right thing, which is to think about what people are able to contribute instead of focusing on what they can't do. And so I think we need a cultural shift as much as we need a policy shift, and that requires all of us to be clearer with our friends, our neighbors, that there are lots of opportunities for people to have meaningful work. They need employers who are willing to be partners, and that does require culture change. So the programs will help do that, and I support them, but we also need to work on that cultural change.
Somebody I know worked at Folk Rehab, and I know that that office was completely overwhelmed. I know that things haven't gotten any better in the recent years since she's left. And the only solution I see is to decouple Vermont's income tax system from the federal government, and to have a guaranteed minimum and a guaranteed maximum income, and then there'll be enough money to fund those offices that help people.
You know, this is an issue, like Molly, that I personally don't know a lot about in terms of how to make the situation better at the state level, but it is also something that I think about a lot in my life. I have someone close to me who has struggled with serious and profound mental illness his entire adult life. And I know we've talked about in our family that work is an important step to feeling dignified. I believe that work is love made visible. It's love for your family. It's love for your community. And when you do not work, it has a crippling effect on your emotional health. So I know in my own family, we have struggled with how do we put things in place so this family member can find meaningful work. So I absolutely would support incentives to employers, but I also think it is similar to what Aaron said. It is sort of a cultural shift, similar to what Tristan said. And what I'm thinking about is how schools can be part of this conversation, because we know early on that there are students with differing needs as young as the elementary school, and we need to be thinking long term about how can we make it possible for these people to have meaningful work for their entire lives. So I'm really looking at a deeper conversation between the education and the economic forces within the county to how to help people find work that's meaningful, no matter their disability.
I find it a little surprising with 10 politicians in the room, there's a problem with warm air or hot air. But anyway, I guess the point I would make is when I get up to the legislature and I listen to the self-advocates who come up there on a regular basis, I see that here are people who, if we did not give a little help, they would not be living on their own or working. So the state has made moves, and there are some cultural changes, as Tristan has talked about. We want to remember what we have done. We passed Act 48. We're moving towards universal health care, and we also have taken actions to be inclusive, and that's the key. In education, we want to be inclusive so all kids can be part of the classroom experience and be helped to do that. In the work situation, that's the same thing we need to do. We need to be as inclusive as possible so people can earn a living as much as they're capable of doing it, and I think we do have the incentives there, and we can continue working on this.
I think we need more than incentives. I think we need a commitment that everybody will have meaningful work, and we should start in the educational system. Students should be paid to go to school. Built into the educational system is that the education is leading to something, not to debt. I think that basically are we going to spend trillions of dollars on war in Afghanistan and Iraq? Or are we going to give people jobs and health care? It's all part of the same thing. We need a legislative commitment in this state that we're going to wipe out poverty, we're going to put everybody to work, everybody has a minimum and maximum income, cradle-to-grave education, cradle-to-grave health care. And if we are really committed to that, we'll find the resources. The system now, it just is not working. We have to change it. We have to change the rules. We have to change the way the Senate works.
As an employer, I already know that Voc Rehab and Weber have helped me obtain some employees. There are some programs already available, incentives, so we don't really need to reinvent the wheel, but we do need to provide funding for them to have the time to be able to commit to that applicant, who would come to me, and to make sure that you are tailoring the job appropriately, so that I'm not surprised about the expectations of the applicant, and they're not surprised about what they can expect from me as an employer and the job that they need to do. Those programs are already there, but they don't have the time to commit as much as possible. I have hired several people who, through the Voc Rehab program, over the years that I've been in business. I think that we already have the availability. They need to be exercised more. There are incentives. They do help employers hire, but we need to understand the limitations and the expectations of those who are looking for work. And again, I'm always more than happy to entertain hiring some more people with disabilities to get them employed. Thank you.
I'm going to invite up, there's two people from Vermont Center for Independent Living who would like to address the candidates and ask a question. I'm going to invite up Gail Kennedy Haynes first.
Hello, my name is Gail Kennedy Haynes. I live here in Brattleboro. And I guess one of the points I wanted to make is nobody ever teaches you how to be a good disabled person. There's no lessons. You know, you just assumed that you are going to be shameful. You need to offer excuses for why this terrible thing happened to you. We're taught that we're less than everyone else, and we're expected to be invisible. And that's so everyone else can feel normal and feel really good about being normal. I have a good friend who tells me, normal is only a setting on your washing machine, and you'll never find it anyplace else. And that's so true, because we all have something that we're dealing with. For me, it started off at birth. I was unfortunately born into a family of extreme abuse. And consequent to that, my spine is deteriorating. I'm needing to use this cane, sometimes a walker. Soon I'll be in a wheelchair. To say that that's difficult is an understatement. That you have been raised abused. As most people do, I gravitated toward the familiar, and I married an abuser. The age-old story. And that abuser I lived with for, let's start off with the 7 years into my marriage. We had a daughter, beautiful little girl, curly red hair, the light of our lives. She had cancer. And my abuser, my husband, said to me, if you leave me, I will cancel the insurance. That was a death sentence for my daughter. So I did the only thing I could do. I stayed. And she had cancer several more times throughout her life. It kept recurring. So I stayed. And I stayed until she was old enough to have her own insurance from her own employer that she could maintain. But the abuse went on. There was no stopping it. It is what it is. Finally, I got away. You know, I'm a clever enough woman to be able to have done that. I got my life together. I started a nonprofit organization that dealt with victims of violent crimes. No surprise there. And I worked for about 30 years doing that until my health deteriorated to such a degree that I was unable to do that. And I had to go out on disability. No insurance from a nonprofit corporation. everything we had donated to us went back into the people we served. So eventually I got on Medicaid, not Medicare, I'm sorry, Medicare, which covers sparsely, very sparsely. A few years ago, after I moved to Brattleboro, I went to my doctor's office. I thought I had a sinus infection. And I said, gee, you know, I think I have a sinus infection. And they said, oh, no, you don't. You have between 20 minutes and 24 hours before you go blind. Your body has decided it's allergic to your arteries. So I'm rejecting my arteries. Then a few months later, they found out that my body is rejecting its skin. Now, just as an aside, I want to say, if I'm going to be allergic to something, I want to be allergic to my fat. I just do, but that's not happening. My skin is going and my arteries are going. I think my arteries are cute. And I would like to spare them. But I have no idea what the future will bring. What I don't know is the future of healthcare in this state and in this country. What the future will be for other women who experienced the same types of things that I did in my life. Abused my entire life, 42 years old, finally got out. Those are the people I'm speaking on behalf of tonight. And I really hope you will keep those women and children and men. Nobody escapes it. I hope you'll keep them all in mind as candidates and as legislators when that time comes. And this is my question. Vermont law says that state budget must address people's needs and advance equity. Will you prevent budget cuts that pit people's needs against one another and instead champion a budget that prioritizes the needs of those most affected by poverty and injustice? Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. I will oppose budget cuts that take away the ability of people to access their health care and their other services. I think that this is a great, and what the Workers' Center does in Montpelier is that I can't do that by myself. I need all of us together, and I think that the advocacy that's happening from the Workers' Center has been very effective. It can be even more so, and coming up to the State House and talking to other legislators and telling them these stories, I think is a really important thing. So I just want to say that we're all part of a bigger system, and we need to get our other colleagues on the same page and understanding what the issues are. So thank you. And
I also want to thank you for offering your story. And I'm not sure where you live, but I'd vote for you. You're very eloquent, and I hope that helps you as you move along, especially given the story.
Third career.
Third career. There you go. Well, I certainly support that. And it's a challenge that you offer to us to make a budget based on our principles, based on our beliefs. Budgets are documents which lay out what we believe and put the money on the table to support that. One of the things we encounter, though, and I'm going to challenge you out there, what we encounter are advocates who have a really sharp focus on an issue. And it's really wonderful to hear that. What I'm going to remind people is there's 25 different committees in the legislature. Each of them has a very important budget. And there's dozens of line items behind every committee. I would challenge you to look beyond the focus of your advocacy and look at the big picture that we have to look at. Because if you look at one piece of the budget as this wall, we have to look at everything on every wall, on every floor, in every room in this building. So I appreciate the challenge. I take the challenge, and I will continue to bring that to Montpelier. Thanks.
Thank you, Gail. It always sounds like a bit of a cop-out to say that the budget is something that needs to be looked at as a whole. But Mike is right. If you have groups that are so specific about their particular position and their particular need, and when you have to put them all together, and so it isn't. I don't think that there's enough money in Vermont, and I might be wrong, but I don't think there's enough money in Vermont for us all to fund everything we would like to fund at the level we would like to fund it. And that sounds like a cop-out, I realize, but I have been there long enough to know that the budget is a compromise. That said, I will continue to work to make sure that those people who are the most vulnerable are least harmed by the budget. So that's, I will say that. And I will say that when we approach healthcare, we always say that one of the issues in healthcare is that you shouldn't have to stay in a job you don't like to keep your health insurance. You also shouldn't have to stay with a spouse that you don't like. So if we had healthcare that was universally accessible to everybody just by virtue of the fact that they live in Vermont, then it would have helped you some. It would not have helped you completely, but it would have helped some. So there are steps to be made. Thank you.
Thank you. Picking up on the budget theme, I think that one of the things that I've learned very quickly being in the legislature is that we do get confronted with a range of choices, and I agree with Jeanette, there isn't enough money. So what that means is that you hopefully will elect people who you think have the integrity and the value system to advocate for the things that are sort of the most important to you. And in this case, I think the question is, are we going to do our best to advocate for some of the issues that confront people who have the least powerful voice in the process already, and I do pledge to be one of those voices for the needy, and I think that this room is full of people who share that view, and the legislature is not. And so, support us in going to advocate for those whose needs are the strongest need out there and who have probably the least political power in the process.
Once again, I think that most of the other candidates here are proposing Band-Aids to a broken system. Capitalism should be a crime, and there should be enough money for all of the poor people and the hardworking people and the disabled people. The system is broken. We're headed towards capitalism is built on growth. The planet has a finite amount of resources. We all need to take care of the planet and each other. And this system isn't doing it for us.
So I was a longtime educator, and one of the things that I said often in meetings with my colleagues is that no matter the decision that was being made in the school or the team or the educational structure, you always have to put the children at the center of the equation and move from there. How will it impact the children? How will it impact their families, and move from there? It's the same kind of eye I will bring to my work in the Senate. I have not been through a budgetary process. I hear keenly what all the representatives are saying here and what Jeanette is saying. Of course, we have a finite amount of resources and many, many needs. But if we put the most vulnerable at the center of the equation that same way, and keeping children at the center and moving out from there, it is a great path to guide us towards responsible decisions that will really protect the least protected among us. Thank you.
When James Haslam called me one day about the budget, he said we have to move forward. And James, for most of you know, is the person in Montpelier for the Worker Center. As a matter of fact, anytime I get a call from the Worker Center, my first question is, how can I be of help? Because that's been my relationship with the Worker Center in Montpelier. But when James called, he said, we have to move the people's budget forward because it wasn't working as well as it should. He's right, and we still need to do that. And what I mean by that is, we have the budgeting process backwards. We start with, we have a bunch of money, how can we allocate it? The budgeting process should start at the grassroots level. It should say, what are the needs of the community, and then how do we fund them? And that's the basics of what we have to do, and that's what we're going to do if we're going to succeed in a budget that meets the needs of the state of Vermont. I think also, when I get up there, I'm going to push again for a combination. We have a silo system on budgeting in Vermont. We have a budget committee in the House, and we have a Ways and Means Committee. Budget spends the money, Ways and Means raises it. Those two committees need to talk to each other. We have to have a system that says, what are our needs? How do we raise the money for those needs? And that raising will include taxing the people who can afford more than they're currently paying so that we can meet the needs of the people. And then we will have the allocation through that committee to meet the needs.
It's a myth that there isn't enough money. It's just in the wrong places. It's a myth that there isn't enough money. It just happens to be in the wrong places. The budgeting as it exists represents an acceptance of a system in which people have the right to make and keep as much money as they can in any way that they choose. Look at the statistics on the concentration of wealth in America. We have people who are going into debt to get educated can't find jobs because the money isn't there. The money isn't there because it's elsewhere. We have to reassess who we are, what our resources are, who has them, and then collectively, democratically, begin to realign our resources so that we can fund the things that we really want to fund. And at that point, we would have unlimited budgets, or at least near unlimited.
I think what I'm hearing from a lot of the people who are already in office is some no's because of limitations with performing budgets and who talks to who and about whether they're making the money or whether they're spending the money. But what I want to do is find a way to get to yes. And to do that, we need to perhaps turn the entire budget on its head and take the most vulnerable people and make sure their budget lines are funded. I mean, all of the budget money sits in different pockets. That's what the accounts are on a budget. So empty them. Start from scratch. Start with the people who need it the most. And then go from there. So if you have less money for the people on the top, well, then you look at the non-performing programs, you look at the redundancies, and the things that aren't really necessary when you realize what was necessary really needs to be necessary, needs to be funded. And from there, you should be able to make a budget.
I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed a shift from your emotional, amazing story of survival to an issue on money. And I'm going to be very clear about this. Whether you vote for me or not is not important. We are going into a deficit of $31 million. Programs are going to be cut. These people who have been elected prior, if they get in again, will do it again. We need to understand very, very clearly that we have a history of judging politicians on the wrong criteria. We have a Vermont Constitution that indicates we must be frugal, and we have gotten so far off that we can't even understand how big the deficit is at this point. And I know that it's a big challenge to understand that we are in austere times, but I'm going to be the first one to say it. We are in for really difficult times. Programs will be cut. You will see it. I'm very sorry that this is going to happen, but whoever you elect to the office, whoever, in whatever office, has an impossible thing to do. Keep that in mind. Personally, I've been doing impossible things all of my life, and so have you. Every grandchild that is raised by a grandparent, every single parent who's raised their children, every veteran and every senior who is now on a shoestring budget has been doing it every day. And if they can do it, these people, whoever you elect, should be able to do it too.
Missy, would you like to come up? Missy Boothroyd from Vermont Center for Independent Living.
Hi, everybody. My name is Missy Boothroyd, and I work at the Vermont Center for Independent Living as the Deaf Independence Program Coordinator for the entire state of Vermont. I know that you've already heard by now that the Vermont Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing has closed as of September 12th. The deaf community is in crisis. On September 27th, we held a rally in Montpelier. It seemed that the governor didn't even really pay attention. And there are many agencies, as in the Vermont Interpreter Referral Service has closed, which hopefully will reopen. But since it's closed, I feel like it has become my duty to try to find interpreters for people because nobody knows how to do it. And the one agency in the state that did that is now closed. There are so many issues because of this closing. There's education that needs to happen, and I can't do it being the only person in the state of Vermont. I've just learned that there are 650 kids who are now being mainstreamed all over the state of Vermont. From my background and my life, from the age of 7, I was mainstreamed. I had no language. I had no communication. I did not understand anything that was going on. I was taught how to speech and speech read, and I got nothing until I was placed in a school for the deaf about the age of 8. Finally, I met deaf adults and role models who signed to me. I could finally understand what was going on. I met deaf kids who were like me. I've been oppressed my entire life by hearing people. My parents finally learned sign after a while. There are 90% of the parents of deaf children don't learn sign. Schools for the deaf provide a language, provide a culture, provide a rich environment. The School for the Deaf became my second home. I worked at Austin School. I taught deaf kids to be like me, to dream like I did, and now it's gone. Where are they? I can't even imagine. And the question I'd like to ask you is, can you find 650 interpreters? Can you find qualified interpreters for every deaf child who will be mainstreamed in Vermont now? Can you give those children socialization? Where's their culture? Where's their language? Where are they going to get that? How are you going to provide that for them? Will you help us get our School for the Deaf back to benefit all of those deaf kids in Vermont? Thank you.
I appreciate your perspective, and I'm going to talk slowly so you can get the signs here. Jeanette, John Moran, and I have been meeting for years with the people at Austin. And the good news is I know from someone who has a daughter who's hard of hearing that there were some good services happening there. The unfortunate piece that I have to conclude is that a lot of the people were let down by the management there. For years, we were meeting with people at Austin and encouraging them to right-size what was happening. And it was not clear, although you would rather have an opportunity to have a school, that all deaf and hard of hearing students wanted that. We have an educational philosophy here in Vermont based on mainstreaming students, not separating people because of a difference. And within the deaf and hard of hearing community, there is still that debate about which way to go. There's the debate about whether to take advantage of cochlear implants. It's not a simple situation, but the bottom line is the advice that was given to people at Austin to right-size what they were doing was not taken. When they started to live off their endowment, we knew it was only a matter of time. The governor has put forward a plan to start to serve those people around the state that have been getting services, and hopefully we can do something again with that beautiful campus out there. But there needs to be a plan that includes people who have the full perspective, and I'd be glad to continue to work with those people. But at the same time, we need to make sure that resources are used wisely and the decisions are made for the benefit of everybody.
Thank you, Missy. So, as Mike said, we have been meeting with people from Austin for quite some time. I was surprised, and it was a shock to me that it closed so suddenly. Since then, I've been working with James Tucker, who is the headmaster of the School for the Deaf in Maryland, and I've been working with him and with Mary Essex, who is the chair of the, I don't remember her title, but
Vermont Association
of the Deaf. She's the executive director. I've learned a lot of things. I had learned some of them before, but we have, as Missy said, we have 650 kids who are deaf or severely hard of hearing in our Vermont schools. And Vermont's policy, when the IDEA, the law was passed, Vermont assumed that deaf children needed special education. But according to James Tucker, the special education law was passed for children who had learning disabilities, not necessarily a hearing disability. So we have had special ed people serving the deaf students. Oftentimes the special ed people don't know the deaf community. So I'm at a loss here. I don't know exactly where we go, but I think we need to look at, should we have some kind of a residential school? Are there people who would opt for residential school over non-residential school? Should we give them the option? In Vermont, we did not, kids could go out of state, take state money and go out of state to a school, rather than looking at the Vermont school first. Is inclusion always the answer? I don't know that, but we should look at the 650 kids that are in the school and say, how are they doing? Academically, socially, culturally, are they doing well or not? We need to look at all those questions, and we need to save the other programs that were part of the Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, not just the residential school itself. Interpretive services, the finding young children when they are first born. Sorry, okay, thank you. This is a very complicated issue, and I'm trying to be on top of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I obviously really concerned about the services that are being provided, not just to the kids, but also to a number of adults throughout the state who are feeling very cut off. I had a man who worked for me as a line cook who is deaf, and he came in to talk to me just recently and very concerned about what his community is going through, and I very emotional, and I think appropriately so. The state was very dependent on a single institution that wasn't up to the challenge of adapting to the changes that it was facing, and we now are left without a lot of answers. And I think that to me is the takeaway right now, is that we don't have a lot of answers. We do hopefully can at the state level move very quickly to provide at least a minimum amount of services and get some of these systems up and running. But the longer term view, what do we do? How do we provide services for the long term in a way that meets, I think, the diversity of needs? So some parents very much want mainstreaming of their kids, some don't. Some adults need more intensive services than others. We need a policy approach that can differentiate need and meet people where they are, and I don't think that the state yet knows what that looks like, and I do pledge to do my best to be part of figuring out what the answer is.
I consider education to be like food, clothing, shelter, heat, healthcare, a necessity. And I can't imagine the state of Vermont finding 600 interpreters for 600 deaf children. I think that if the system were changed, there'd be enough money to provide the school for the children that wanted to go there and for mainstreaming the children that didn't want to go there.
One of the things I've been thinking about as I've heard the various speakers, excuse me, is that one of my master's degrees is in Native American education and the history of Native American education. And the issues are not dissimilar in terms of trying to figure out how do you meet the needs of a particular community without betraying their culture, without forcing them into situations that are uncomfortable to them, without depriving them of their history and their family experience. And through my research, one of the things that was perpetuated in states across this country was that people who were putting educational structures in place were not talking to the right people. And so I really strongly encourage the state of Vermont, which I hope I will be part of the team with Jeanette working on this in the Senate, to be talking to the right people in those families, because there is not going to be one solution that meets the need of all of those families. They're going to have different priorities for their families and for their individual children. I feel strongly that we do need to get the systems back in place that were outgrowths of the school, if not the school itself. And I hear what you're saying about right sizing. It was clear as a town meeting rep in Brattleboro for years, we knew that there were financial troubles at the school, and there was unfortunately poor leadership there, not through anyone's lack of caring, but they did not have the skills that they needed to see the school through. So I think my time is up. Thank you, Spoon.
My first reaction was a real sense of grief, because I really miss going over there. Over the years, I've been over to the Austin School and trying to understand a culture that I'm not part of. And as Becca said, it's a cultural issue. It's not just a mainstream education issue. Some of the answers we've heard here are so right on the money. Mike's especially explaining the dynamics that went down, and Jeanette and others. It is a painful episode. The real estate handling over there was really caused real problems in terms of keeping that campus open. And we legislators, our responsibility is to know everything about everything. And we can't do that sometimes. And there are some things, especially when we get into the area of the school of mainstreaming versus the school of a culture, of a deaf culture. I just try to understand it more and more. And all of us, I think, are saying very clearly that we are going to work as hard as we can to make it better for what it is right now.
Obviously, the hearing impaired and everybody else should have choices. And there should be the resources to do that. But we're educating people, they're going into debt, they're seeking meaningful work, and the jobs are not there. So we're cutting off our nose despite our face. The young who want to work in these important fields, who want to help people, who want meaningful work, go into debt, they can't find the work, then they despair, and the cycle continues. So yes, we can find 600 interpreters, we can find anything that we need, as long as it becomes a priority, and as long as we're willing to face the insanity of our foreign policies and the insanity of profits in the corporate world and say, no, we've had enough of it. We want to change. We want to We want to release that money and resources so that we can start a new Austin school for the deaf when the first one doesn't work.
I have to say that from my end of Windham County, I was following the progression of what happened with Austin School, and I have to say, Vermont is failing these 650 children. I'm ashamed and appalled that it got to that point where where something couldn't have been done by legislature or a conservatorship or something in order to keep the school in place. And we're not talking here about just providing services for deaf children or hearing impaired children. And adults. We're talking about their community, what keeps them alive, what keeps them going, as you've already said, dreaming and providing themselves with an environment that creates a life that they will want to live in. I know I'm not part of the deaf community. It has not been something that I have had grandchildren or children that have been impaired. But I believe that we should have found a solution. We haven't got one now, and it's desperate that something be done immediately to provide them with their needed community and connection. We've disconnected them, and we are failing them, and sending them into mainstream education is setting them up to fail. As I said, I was ashamed, and we all should be, that this happened.
I've been working tirelessly with the Austin School for the Deaf because I have a child who was diagnosed in 11th grade with auditory processing disorder. I will work the rest of my life doing whatever I can to help the deaf and hard of hearing. We have not only failed them, we failed their language. This is what they hear. They hear that we're not listening. And if we don't take measures in this legislative session to do anything else, we must return their language. It was because of a board of directors that they failed. 14 people sat around a table going on and not able to figure it out. If they brought in people, they might have been able to figure it out. But also, we had a failure to oversee the audit, and audit the grants that were given. So that was a problem too. And the board is probably dissolved by now, so you probably can't even talk to them. There are only a skeleton few people left. And if we failed in all of the other ways, we also failed, I believe, in protecting their civil rights. And I only want you to know that if you elect me, right beside me will be an interpreter. Right beside me. I would cut my salary in half. That's how important it is to me.
It is a very terrible tragedy that this has happened at the school, for the deaf community, for the town of Brattleboro. I'm very familiar with Austin. I taught art at Hilltop Montessori School for many years, and all of the time that Hilltop was at Austin. And so I was very familiar with seeing the children there, the teachers. I know how dedicated everybody was and what a great community it was. I think that it's, now that this has happened, I think this could be an opportunity to look at, out of the ashes of something can arise, that out of conversations, out of a exploration of what the needs are, out of conversations with state officials, with the deaf community, what could be put into place that would meet the needs of that community. And I think that we need to really think, instead of going back and assigning blame or thinking, I think we need to just look forward with a positive attitude about how we can serve this community.
Thank you. We'd like to invite up Vicki Senney from West Brattleboro. She's a member of Brattleboro Food Co-op Local 1459 United Food and Commercial Workers.
2 years ago, I began working with my comrades at the Brattleboro Food Co-op on collective bargaining with management and representatives from the UFCW to come up with our first union contract, which we now have in place. The history of this particular struggle was new to me at the time, and more than anything, as I quickly learned, it was about workplace dignity. I told some of my coworkers that I'd be here talking briefly about dignity in the workplace, and did they have any thoughts to contribute? It's about management listening to and taking action on employee issues, someone said. We just wanted to be equal, another coworker said. And I chimed in saying that we would never be equal economically, and that this was a different kind of equality that we were seeking. So she said, we wanted our voices to not just be heard, but counted. We want to contribute. We want to have a say. There's already a division in pay. Wage earners are incredibly vulnerable in ways that some of the folks on the other side of the bargaining table have never known. During the time when we were negotiating healthcare costs, which was a dreadful process, actually, I had to cancel a doctor's appointment because I wasn't able to pay for it. And I couldn't imagine how others who earn even less than me could ever go to the doctor. In negotiating sessions, we pushed constantly for lower health insurance costs and didn't hesitate to point out how things were harder for us workers as opposed to our managers who have secure salaries and who were proposing higher weekly insurance costs. I told them that a few dollars here and there does make a difference in our case. And the head negotiator for management came to me the morning after a pretty harsh session. And he said, I just want to make sure that this isn't personal. At any given time, I work between 2 and 5 jobs to pay my bills, which do include student loans from an education that I can put on my resume, and it might allow me to make a few dollars more per hour than some of my colleagues. What's striking to me, as I mentioned, is that some of my coworkers who make less have children and more bills, and different bills than I do. So we weren't all at the table because we can't all be. We work, we care for kids, for elders, for others, and we struggle, many of us, to care for ourselves. For all of us, this is personal, because workers are people, too. It also has to be part of a larger collective struggle, and those in power, those with say, have to join the struggle even if you don't know what it's like to live hand to mouth or paycheck to paycheck. Workers are the heart and the engine of any institution. Eventually, we have to redefine our relationships to one another and come to an equal footing economically. But as we all know, it isn't going to be easy, and sadly probably won't happen soon. So we have unions. And I'm proud to say that I'm now a unionized worker, part of a collective that supports people's rights to dignified work. So my questions for you are the following. Do you support the right of all workers to live and work with dignity? To that end, will you support policies that guarantee all workers a livable wage, paid sick leave, and the right to organize and collectively bargain to improve their working conditions?
So I could very simply say yes, yes, and yes to your question, because that is the answer. And I think that we have made strides toward it. We increased a minimum wage this last year. It isn't as much as we would have liked, but we did increase it some. We have given the right to organize to child care workers and home health care workers. If we separate health care from employment and people pay for their health care according to their ability to pay as opposed to a flat premium, regardless of your income, that will make a huge difference. So my quick answer is yes, I will support the right to work with dignity. Yes, I will support the right to earn paid time off, the right to organize, and I can't remember the third part of that question, but the answer was yes.
Yeah, I would say yes as well, and also speak a little bit about my own experience, because I work in the food service industry, and the food service industry is one of the toughest industries in the country for livable wage and for quality of life. And I guess I would say that we need all the tools. So we need strong unions where strong unions are able to advocate. We need cultural change. I have an MBA from Marlborough College Grad Center because I believe that businesses actually can try to be bottom-up led. They can be places where people are valued at all levels within an organization, and I wanted to be part of a business community that tried to think that way. And I also think that there are times where we don't recognize as consumers how much power we have. And that's, I think, for my industry, one of the really big things. If we want cheap food, we're going to get low wages for workers in a lot of environments because that's where the money comes from to pay the workers. So we need all of it. We need the strong unions, we need the strong workers, we need the business leaders who are not afraid to really engage with all of their employees and respect and value their employees and have their employees have a part in the process of running and thinking about their businesses. Thank you.
I know that unions have played a strong role in the history of the United States. We've got an 8-hour work week, although that's disappearing, and so are a lot of other things. But the system I'm proposing is not just a minimum wage, a good minimum wage, but it's a maximum wage, so that there isn't a big disparity between how much people make. And my dream is that everybody would have meaningful work and be paid well for it.
I think we are all shaped by our experiences, and when you have worked in the food industry, like Tristan, I worked in the food industry for a long time, and actually my first job was in fast food. It was at a Burger King. And when you have that as your first job and your frame of reference, you understand work in a different way. And when you put yourself through college by working in the food service industry, you have a different view of what it means to work hard while trying to juggle going to school. And I think I bring that perspective with me in my work world even today, even though now I'm blessed with having had the opportunity to get a college degree, and I was able to go on and get a graduate degree, partly because the UAW was my labor organization at UMass when I was a teaching assistant, and that's how I was able to teach and get an education and not and not take on more debt. So I'm going to put a plug in for that. The answer is yes, I do support all of those initiatives. And I also believe that an important job that we have here in Windham County is working on workforce development at every level and making sure people have the opportunity to get the work that they want so they don't feel trapped in jobs. Thank you.
Yes, 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 not only for what I will do, but for what I've already done, and many people at this table I've already done, and I think Jeanette already mentioned it. I serve on a committee, I'm vice chair of the Labor Committee, I'm also co-chair of the Working Vermonters Legislative Caucus, and through our committee and through my caucus came the paid sick time bill, which did not get out of the House, but it came through. 60,000 Vermont women, mostly a lot of single parents, mothers, don't have sick time, so if they get sick, they have a choice, go to work sick or stay home and lose a day's pay. We got through my committee the organizing bill for both the daycare workers and for the home providers and the child care workers. I myself were part of creating a union at HCRS. When we weren't getting paid correctly, I joined other people to form a union at the designated mental health agency. The minimum wage was a compromise that's not acceptable to me. It was the best we could get through this time around. I did introduce legislation for a livable wage. I will quote FDR that says no business has a right to exist if it can't afford to pay its employees a livable wage. That's where we have to head. We have to have a livable wage for every job in this state, whether it's in well-developed jobs or whether it's working in the tourism industry. If a person is cleaning toilets or operating a ski lift or changing sheets in the bed, they have a right to a livable wage as much as anybody else has, and we can't afford to have industries in this state that don't realize the need to pay people a livable wage.
I agree with you. The question is, how do we get there? That is the $64 question. I think what we need is that we need a taxation system, we need a state bank, we have to decouple our tax system from the federal system and not piggy bank on it. We have to raise the money to subsidize the workers at the co-op, to subsidize the food. We shouldn't be, it shouldn't be dependent on people who can only afford good food. That food should be available for everybody, and it should be affordable. So where there's meaningful work, yes, the workers and the administrators should have equal say in how it's run. But in order for it to really run well, there has to be a sizable subsidization of such a potentially wonderful organization as the Brattleboro Food Co-op, so that we really have enough money so that no one working at the Brattleboro Food Co-op would make less than $35,000 or $40,000 a year, because that's probably what it takes to live with dignity in Brattleboro or anywhere else in the so-called richest country in the world. So the question is, how do we do it? And I think we have to change the system. I agree with Aaron Diamondstone here.
I agree with all of the initiatives. My only hesitation has to do with the fact that 60% of the businesses in the state of Vermont are small businesses, which means, according to the federal level, they have less than 20 employees each. And unless the system changes in which those 60% of businesses can charge more for their services, when you have many owners, as I am one, who make little or nothing, unless there's something available left in the pocket after paying my employees and all the taxes that I'm overburdened with by the state in order to provide the services that they need. Unless that happens, your small businesses will not be able to afford what everyone wants and everyone needs and should have, which is a livable wage. That's it. Thank you.
I've had the dynamic experience of having been in food and beverage almost all my life. It is one of the most incredible fields of teamwork that you could ask for. I would take any person off of a fast food or a food and beverage area to work with me on any project, and it'll get done faster, quicker, as well as cheaper. Just to give you an idea, I went right before here to the Department of Labor, and the latest thing that they could tell me was in 2011 from the Vermont Food Industry Economic Impact Study, and it says here that the food industry is defined as responsible for 15% of the overall Vermont economy. Now, what does that translate to? 21,000 jobs, and still growing. We are in an unprecedented time here. In Dover, we have jobs that are right here in Brattleboro. We have them probably all over where there are jobs available. People don't want to take them, but they are jobs. And this particular study says that these jobs collectively pay over $837 million in this, an average of $37,000 an employee. Now that, I don't know how they figure that, but people work multiple jobs. So that is something. I want to propose it very quickly. I have an idea, IDEA. Keep this in mind. Individual daily eating allowance. I want to start a program in the school system that would repurpose the schools without consolidation and feed every single person that is needing a food.
Regarding the questions about dignity of work, and I would totally say yes to all those questions. I supported the co-op workers before the board when there was an initial conversation with the board about the right to unionize. I know that there had been a lot of issues around that, and feeling the lack of dignity, feeling lack of respect from management, and I'm happy that this is that the union has come into place. I also supported the child care workers in their quest. Took about 4 years to get recognition, but they finally got it last year. I have a small nonprofit, very small, and I do hire some people here and there, and I pay them way more than anybody, with the small amount of money that this nonprofit makes. I try to really pay my employees very well and just try to set that good example. It's not that I'm paying a wage to anybody, but just for the hours that people work. And I just want to say that I totally believe that everyone has a right to a dignified workplace and enough money to live on and not have to work 3 jobs.
Thank you for sharing your story again. We've certainly heard some amazing stories from people who are our everyday heroes here, and I support what you're asking for. I've been working for that for all workers here in Vermont. I should also mention that many of us have also been supporting that for immigrant farm workers too here in Vermont. And we've done a lot of work to help that move along too, because we feel that's an important issue, and all workers here in Vermont should be treated equal. I came from a union family. My grandfather was a big union man, and I know whenever he was on strike, the whole household was in turmoil based on what time he had to walk the picket lines, whether it was 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So I understand the struggles that have come. I appreciate your work, and I almost wish us legislators could get somebody like you to organize, and maybe we'd have a livable wage. How many of you know what the salary is for a legislator? Chad?
About what, $10,000?
$10,600 for a year. We could use some organizing. And I mention that because we do it because we love Vermont. We certainly don't do it for the money. And we love Vermont and want it to be the great place it is that we live in, and want it to be for generations to come. That's why we passed the marriage equality bill. It's why we passed the GMO labeling bill. It's why we passed the child care bill. It's why we're the state most focused on creating sustainable jobs in the energy field, because we know a good economy helps workers everywhere. And we know, as FDR said, when we all do better, we all do better. And I think that's the ultimate goal for those of us who are here and trying to work for the benefit of all of us here. So thank you for sharing again, and thank you for your work in organizing at the co-op.
Your mention of energy is a great segue to the next person who's going to come up, Caitlin Clark, who's a student at SIT, and she is a campus organizer with Green Up SIT.
Hi, my name is Caitlin Clark, and I'm pursuing a master's in sustainable development at SIT. Jerry, I really liked what you said about paying students to go to school, so I think we should lead with that. I'm currently working as the campus coordinator for a student organization called Green Up SIT. We're exploring sustainable initiatives on campus, including energy efficiency, renewable power sources, and sustainable food production, as well as our impact on a global scale. SIT is part of a larger institution called World Learning, which oversees education, development, and cultural exchange programs in more than 60 countries. Given the impressive range and impact this institution has around the world, we're also interested in seeing World Learning become a leader in the growing movement to divest from fossil fuel companies. Scientists have warned that carbon emissions from burning fossil fuels are causing climate change. Fossil fuel companies hold reserves that have 5 times as much coal, oil, and gas than climate scientists believe is safe to burn. And in order to keep the Earth in livable shape, 80% of these fossil fuels must be kept underground. As we know, this is not only an environmental concern, but one that affects communities disproportionately, threatens livelihoods, and compromises our shared future. As an engaged student and a concerned citizen, I'm interested to hear how you will lead Vermont in a just transition to a sustainable economy, one that is in harmony with our planet. Will you support policies that move us away from a fossil fuel economy through divestment of Vermont's pension funds from these companies? Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to think a little bit more on the divestment at the pension level, just only because I don't know mechanically how that works, but I support the thinking behind it, and I'm supportive of the 350.org's push in that direction. Very concerned about sustainability, very concerned about climate change. One of the things that I think has happened even in a state like Vermont, where we are in many ways at the leading edge of what state governments are doing around energy efficiency, green energy policy, is that we don't have a shared understanding of the crisis that we do face, and even it's not real to people in a uniform way. And so One of the things that I did try to do last session, and I will try again to figure out how to make this more meaningful, I introduced an idea of a climate scorecard, something that looked at iconic industries within Vermont that were cross-sector, so snowmobiling, maple syrup, ski, food production, looking at ways in which we can measure the impact that we are already experiencing from climate change. Because part of what we need is for Vermonters to recognize that this is all of our problem. This is a problem for all Vermonters. It is changing. The landscape of Vermont is changing. The business climate of Vermont, it's changing. The living experience of Vermont, and it will be for a long time. And we need to share responsibility for that, and out of that shared responsibility, I think we will have better solutions that we can put forward, both in policy and also in personal practice and changes in people's lives.
Yes, I support divesting in oil and coal. I've been installing solar hot water since 1983. Green energy is a big deal to me. I think this country and this world is on a collision course with fate. It just doesn't look good to me, and I think we need to change quickly as possible. And the reduce, reuse, recycle motto, reducing is key. That's why it comes first. And so if we can reduce our energy consumption, I'd love to keep the oil in the ground, and I confess I use oil to heat my home. I install heating systems. I've been doing it since 1983 also. I try to make high-efficiency heating system installations as best I can. I'd love to tell a homeowner, insulate your house first before you pay me to put in a boiler. We need to change the direction of where we're going.
One of the things I was thinking about while Aaron was talking is that I could feel a little bit of guilt in what you were saying, that you feel bad about that, having to make that decision for yourself. And throughout this campaign, there were times when I took a little heat because I support wind power, and there were some towns that were very much against it. And I, like Aaron, I'm thinking about this issue of renewables and our goals in Vermont, and how we as citizens need to stop alienating each other in the way that we talk about these things. There is this sense that there's this holier-than-thou attitude sometimes around these issues, whether it's somebody who has, who says they're off the grid, and I have people in my own family, they say they're off the grid, but they drive way, 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 way far out, into town, into Brattleboro every day to work. And they're off the grid, and those of us in town who are, sometimes feel superior because we can walk downtown and we can, shop at the co-op and go to the post office and, we live in town and we're not having an impact. The truth is we all have an impact, and we need to own that, and we need to stop putting these barriers up between each other and talk honestly about what we each can do in our own lives, in our own communities, to make it possible for Vermont to meet its renewable goals, because they're very audacious, and I mean that in the best possible way. But it's going to...
The question is about divestment.
Well, that was the last question, was about divestment, and much like Tristan, I honestly don't know much about it. And in theory, absolutely, I support it. I was on the college campuses 30 years ago when we were trying to divest from South Africa. So in my heart and in my spirit, I absolutely support it. I need to look more at the issue because I'm uneducated about it on the level of the pension funds in Vermont and how it will impact workers, because it's all related. So thank you.
When I go door to door, I talk to constituents. One of my constituents in Reedsboro, he has 1 acre. And on that 1 acre, he has, first he showed me he had a little windmill in his house, or a wind tower. Then he showed me his solar panel, and I started to say, all you need is hydro. And he said, come on with me. And he showed me his little hydro plant that he had too. His entire property, 1 acre, you had trouble walking on it because it was all garden. Because he makes his own wine, his own cheese, and he does all this. I'm not saying he's totally off the grid, but I thought he is the example of what the state of Vermont is. We're probably one of the most energy efficient states, one of the states that's trying very hard to not be, we did pass a law against fracking. Of course, we don't frack in Vermont, but that was nice that we passed it anyway. So the point is that, yes, we will, first of all, do everything in our power to continue non-reliance on oil and gas and reliance on the renewable energies For example, you can have solar without having it on your own property. We have set it up so the system is so that you can buy into a solar farm somewhere else. It will affect your rates. You can almost net meter back to yourself without putting it on your own property. So the state has come up with a lot of ingenious ways to approach this. Yes, we'll all be happy to talk to Beth Pierce about how we invest our money, and consistent with the state of Vermont, if we can find better investments for the programs that all of us here say we need, then we will pursue that option too.
I'm certainly for divestiture. It's too little and it's too late, but I'm for it, certainly. I think we have to think in the long run about having a mass transit system that uses less energy, railroads, buses. Anybody who was on the road this weekend knows what I'm talking about. Our roads are clogged with cars. Everybody has to have their own car, and everybody has to fill their car with gas for $50 or $60, whatever it is. Yes, we have to change the way we use resources, and in order to do that, we have to really take on the oil companies and the coal companies that have been running this country. That would be a start.
Actually, I didn't know anything about the type of investments that are currently being done in the state. That'd be new to me. But I'm appalled that we target ourselves as eco-friendly, and yet we provide our money, get our money or some of it through investments that are with non-ecological users. So I would say, yes, we have to create priorities about what we plan to stand for. So that would include getting rid of divesting those investments and changing them out. As to renewable power, when I was a trustee on the Village of Bells Falls, I championed the change to sustainable energy. I didn't get a lot of assistance, and there was a lot of pushback because they're currently using and have every year used the same form of fossil fuel. And it's for the future that we need to change this. And we already have a geothermal system in Bellows Falls, in the Rockingham area, and it has gone lapse. It was used back in the 80s, and they let it go by the wayside. It's viable, and I tried to bring in people who would actually look at that. I think what I would have to say is, to cut this short, is if I was in the House, what I would do is create a document that would require a directive to municipalities to get them to 30% at least sustainable energy within the next 5 years, so by 2020. That they would all have to do that because they want us to do it individually. And there are incentive programs, and you pay the money out, you get the money back from your taxes or whatever. But the reality is, get your communities to go first, and then we can all piggyback on that, and then everybody's doing it. And I think that would be an important way to get the entire state of Vermont motivated to sustainable energy. Thank you.
Since 2008, Vermont residents' electric rates have risen over 17%, while New England's have actually dropped by 11%. So Vermont's electric rates are an eye-popping 40% higher than the national average. Let that sink in for a little bit. You know, we are a state that relies on a variety of fuels. We heat our homes, sometimes with oil, sometimes with heat, sometimes with solar, sometimes with electric. And it's going to be very challenging. Unlike Jerry, who didn't like that traffic, I'm going to say I love that traffic. I will say that we are built on that traffic. If we deny the fact that we are a tourism state, we will lose millions over the course of making any changes to that. So I'm not clear on how we can change those things. And I would have to say I would be the only one probably not able to say definitively what I would do. I would need to study it more, because it's a complex issue, and I like the way people and policy mix, and if it's a deficiency, then I'd like to rectify it, but I can't say what I would have to do.
I've been concerned about climate change for over 25 years, and all the predictions are now coming true. I totally support divestment. One of the things that impelled me to run for the legislature was the issue of climate change. I asked to be on the Transportation Committee because I felt that was one place where I could possibly have some influence over cutting carbon emissions. It's a very hard thing to do. I also requested appointment on the Public Transit Advisory Council in order to be able to keep advocating for better public transit. I think that I did go to the march in New York City a couple weeks ago. It was very inspiring. It was very exciting to be there, but the momentum needs to be kept up. I love the slogan of that is to change everything, we need everyone. And I think that that's just one of the main focuses of my life right now. We are in the legislature. We've been trying to put in more money for weatherization. It didn't happen last year. Hopefully this year we have a climate caucus in the legislature. And a state energy plan that's supposed to get us to 90% renewables by 2050. I think the problem is not Vermont, the problem is worldwide. But as Vermont, we can be an example to other states, to the world, the way people look to Germany. We have a great new solar array in Brattleboro that's quite exciting, and things are snowballing, but we're racing against time. And I think that the more that the economics of it become unfeasible, that's why I support divestment, to make it less feasible for the oil companies.
I support divestment, and I support what we're doing already. Our treasurer, Beth Pierce, right now has started an option for state employees to choose, when they have all their options laid out for where their retirement money goes, to choose a carbon-free option. So all the investments will not include, will have been divested. So we've started already. We can do more. I thought I understood this issue, but I was educated by our students. We had a group of 350.org students come to the State House, and I met with a bunch of them. And one of the students said, when I hear people say that climate change doesn't exist, or that we shouldn't do anything about it, I remind them we have another term for climate change, our future. And when you say climate change doesn't exist or we shouldn't do anything about it, what you're saying to us is our future doesn't matter to you. And I want to let everyone know the future matters to me. I've already been working in that way so that I've been endorsed by the Sierra Club because my voting record and the policies I espouse talk about that. I want to mention something else. I've been endorsed by Planned Parenthood. And I mention that because I think we've forgotten that population growth is another environmental concern. And we used to talk a lot about zero population growth. Our planet cannot continue to grow its population at the rate it is. And I think this is something else we need to get out in front about, talk more about family planning as an environmental concern. So, yes, I support divestment and I support your future.
So very quickly, Aaron is right. Efficiency is first. My committee is the one that deals with the pension funds. The committee that I've chaired for the last 8 years is the one that deals with the pension funds of Vermont. We had a bill last year to divest of all of our pension funds from oil companies or companies that use fossil fuel. It is not as simple as it seems. And I know that sounds again like a cop-out, and nothing is ever as simple as it seems. There are many companies that are moving away from fossil fuels. They're mixed companies, so the question is, do we divest from those companies? And let me give you an example here of something that came up to my committee before. It was about cage-free chickens. So we wanted to buy cage-free eggs from cage-free chickens. We had a farm in Middlebury that was going toward cage-free chickens. We buy millions of eggs every year, the state of Vermont does. So we don't want to buy any eggs from caged chickens. They said to us, because we buy a lot of our eggs from them, they said, if you do that, you can't buy our eggs because we're moving in that direction, but we're not completely there yet. And if you don't buy our eggs, we'll go out of business because you're our biggest customer. And then we won't have any source for buying cage-free eggs. So we had to make a decision. Is it better to help them move in that direction, or is it better to just cut them off? So the decision was the same around divestiture from fossil fuel companies. And we wanted to come up with a compromise, and we wanted to have our treasurer and some students from 350 and some other people sit down and say, how can we as a state of Vermont use our money to best leverage climate change in a positive direction? Is it by divesting, or is it by something else? The students from 350.org did not want to have a compromise. They either wanted us to divest and pass the bill, or not divest and not pass the bill. So I'm happy to say that our treasurer, as Mike said, has been going forward with that anyway, but as a result, we didn't have any bill at all. So yes, I think we should, but I'm not sure how it happens and what the process is. And I have to tell you, we took probably 2 weeks of testimony on this, and it is a very complicated issue. Thank you.
So I want to thank all the candidates for coming out tonight, and the audience for coming, and listening to the folks who would like to represent you in Montpelier. I think we're really lucky in Windham County to have such an engaged group of candidates, to have so many candidates who wanted to come. The flip side of that is that it meant that we couldn't get through all the questions that people had. So if you turned in a question on a card that didn't get asked, or you feel like your question wasn't addressed through the response to some other question, and you want to grab your card and address the candidates at some other time, that's fine. We also invite people in the audience and the candidates to hang around. There's a ton more refreshments, and talk informally. Molly, did you have a question?
I'm sorry, but I forgot to say that Representative Valerie Stewart called me today. She had a family emergency. She was hoping to be here, but she couldn't be, and I forgot to say it earlier. So just
Great,
wanted
thanks,
to
Molly.
put that on the record.
Thank you very much. We also want the potential legislators to know that we are prepared to take up the challenge that was given to us tonight, which is to work with you to overcome any obstacles on the road to a Vermont where all the people in our state can enjoy their human rights and where we're contributing to a healthy planet, including the specific challenge that was thrown out to us about not having all the issues in separate silos, to really work together. We're willing to work with you on that. We encourage any of the candidates and audience members who want to stay and visit informally. If you have more questions for the candidates or things you want to discuss with them, any of them who can stick around, you can have those conversations. Mary, did you have?
I just wanted to thank the interpreters in the Center for Independent Living for allowing us the opportunity to communicate through you. Thank you very much.
Mike?
Just a point of information. My district mate, Representative David Dean, couldn't be here, and he also sends his regrets. He will be available next week. David and I are going to be holding 2 forums for voters to meet with us in our district. On the 21st, Tuesday night, we'll be meeting in Westminster at the Westminster Institute. On Thursday, the 24th, we'll be meeting at the Putney Firehouse at 6 o'clock.
Great, thanks, and hopefully there'll be PR going out about that. Jerry?
I think there will be a forum Saturday at 12 o'clock at the, what is it called? The River Garden. The River Garden for Liberty Union, and other candidates have been invited this Saturday from 12 to 1. Is that correct? excuse me, 11 to 12. Hope some of you can make it.
Thanks, Deborah.
Yeah, I don't, I don't think that there's anyone from Windham 3 here, but just to let people know that if they have additional questions for me, I'm having a meet and greet down at the Flatiron Building in Ellis Falls, which is brand new, which is a new place that's opened just a couple months ago. If anyone wants to speak to me from 6 to 7:30, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
So Pete Seeger tells a story about a seesaw, and on one side of the seesaw there's a big boulder, a stone holding down one side, and on the other side there's a bucket, and people are coming up and putting one grain of sand at a time into the bucket. And people are saying, well, that's not going to change anything. But eventually, if enough people put that one grain of sand in the bucket, the balance of power will shift. One grain of sand plus one grain of sand. when you leave here, you'll all be members of Copenhagen, so we can only do this together.